Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on April 20th, 2026 for Reason to Resist. Today, we're very pleased to be joined by Pepe Escobar. Pepe hardly needs an introduction, but for those few of you who might not be familiar with his groundbreaking journalism, Pepe is a Brazilian journalist known for his work in alternative media and geopolitical analysis. He has reported extensively from regions around the world, most notably West and Central Asia, and has contributed to numerous international publications over the years. Just a few of them I'll mention: Asia Times, Al Jazeera, and RT. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pepe.
My pleasure, Dimitri. Greetings from Buddhist Southeast Asia. Peaceful latitude.
I hope they're still finding the capacity to meditate in these troubled times.
Yes, we badly need it, right? Meditation and massage.
Especially here in Greece. So, Pepe, I'd like to begin by just reminding people to like and share this video if they find it to be informative. Please join our subscription base if you haven't already done so. Help us to expand the reach of our resistance journalism. So with that, Pepe, after U.S. naval forces attacked an Iranian cargo ship in international waters yesterday, by all appearances, the so-called ceasefire is hanging by a thread. And first off, I'd like your impressions, your assessment of why you think the Trump regime took the highly provocative step at this critical moment of attacking a civilian Iranian vessel in international waters during a ceasefire.
Wow. Because essentially they have no strategy. The whole strategy after this thing went completely sour in the first 24 to 48 hours after the decapitation strike against Ayatollah Khamenei and the leadership. Everything is inside the head of a psychopath, sociopath, riddled with acute dementia already, and with his sidekick as a tattooed, drunken former platoon commander in Iraq. How can you have a strategy when you are facing probably I would say the geopolitical crossroads of the 21st century in front of us, everywhere? This is the crux of the war between the declining empire and Eurasia as a whole. So they never had a strategy to start with. Their tactics are appalling, as everyone can see, even Americans, in fact. And now, when we are theoretically in the middle of the road towards Islamabad 2, Islamabad 1 was not a total disaster, because there's a little window open, and the Pakistanis, of course, they are doing their best to keep it open towards Islamabad 2. So when we are on the brink of a possible Islamabad 2, by the way, it would be today, but obviously there's no Iranian delegation in Islamabad. They come up with an attack against a civilian Iranian tanker coming from a Chinese port. We don't know what's inside, but it may be something. They focused their lasers on the Tuska because they are almost absolutely sure that in the cargo they're going to find a sodium perchlorate, which is an essential component of solid fuel for Iranian ballistic missiles. That's the Tuska riddle. Let's put it this way. But why do it now? Breaking the ceasefire, because, as you mentioned correctly, this is an act of war in international waters. What do they expect to gain out of it? So obviously there's no strategy. Obviously there's nobody, National Security Council, retired Pentagon generals, whatever, saying, look, let's wait. There is the end of the ceasefire and there is Islamabad 2. Maybe Vance and Kalibaf can come to some sort of agreement. No, it's out of the blue. It's so, it baffles us because it's so childish in geopolitical terms. These people are not even amateurs,
Yeah.
They're typical pigeons kicking the chessboard completely. You know. So yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing, and please feel free to disagree with me, although I suspect you'll be in agreement. Even if that cargo ship had jet fuel or just lethal armaments, it could be man pads, it could be missile components, it could be any number of things, air defense systems. There's absolutely no violation of international law involved there. The Iranians, as the victims of an aggression, are perfectly entitled to call upon friendly states to help them defend themselves. And so that would not even provide a justification for an attack on the vessel if, in fact, they found, armaments or jet fuel, rocket fuel, whatever it may be. I assume you share that view, Pepe. Is that fair?
No, yeah, of course, I agree with you. And of course, these, for instance, what Russia is sending to, we don't have nobody has these details. This is Ministry of Defense kind of secret information. They have the famous Astrakhan Tehran shuttle. It's aerial, never on surface. No way. And what the Chinese sent to the Iranians, same thing. These are cargo planes coming from China. It's a completely different story. They will never risk sending it through the Indian Ocean. No way.
Right.
So there's no this an extra no justification for something that from the start is an act of war, right?
Correct. So let's switch to the Red Sea for a moment. Iran's government has threatened to call on its Yemeni ally Ansarallah to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. And the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is certainly one of the most important choke points in international maritime commerce. You were in Yemen about 1 year ago, I understand, and you reported extensively on the ground there. I think you may also have had the opportunity to speak to Yemeni government officials. What was your assessment at the time about the situation on the ground, the capacity of Ansarallah after the horrendous attacks it had to sustain from the Israelis and the Americans to contribute to a closure of the strait? And do you think that we are about to see the entry of Ansarallah into this conflict? They've been, as you noted before we started today, rather quiet during the past 6 weeks. What's your assessment of where they're likely to go?
They are in a wait and see mode at the moment. It's fascinating how quiet they are. We don't see their spokesman going out. By the way, this guy is a pop idol all across the global south. we met him. Can you believe that he visited us in our hotel in Sana last year? He spent 45 minutes with us, and we were desperate. We were, why you're here? The Americans may know that you're here. And the guy was unflappable, cool as a cucumber, very well prepared. In fact, the whole Ansarallah leadership, we met many of them in Sana, and then they took us to Sada. Why? Because they wanted to show us the birthplace of Ansarallah. In the mountains of Sada, it's about 120, 140 kilometers from the Yemeni-Saudi border. So when you see the geology of Sada, you understand. It's a valley surrounded by mountains. It's perfect for guerrilla warfare. That's where they learn how to do their Yemeni version of Vietnamese guerrilla warfare. Very well educated people, very well prepared. They explained, for instance, the tradition in engineering, mathematics, and physics since the time of Mao. Can you believe it that this is something that I didn't know at the time? They took us to, there is a Chinese obelisk on the hills overlooking Sana. And do you know what this obelisk is commemorating? Chinese workers during the Mao era that were sent to Yemen to do public works.
Right.
Very few people in the West know about this. You only know something about this when you go there. So this very close link between Yemen and China dates from the late 50s, 60s already. Same thing with Russia. So they told us, look, for instance, I went to the university in Sada. It's a first class university, by the way, bombed by the Saudis years ago. Then they rebuilt it. So there is a long tradition of top level math and science for decades. And of course, with help from the Soviet Union and from China. So that explains why the great deal of their industrial military complex is developed by themselves. Of course, they had help from Iran. There's no question about that. But for instance, they've developed their own missiles, their own ballistic missiles. So, and they everything when you have a conversation with them is fascinating because it's not only about military matters or geopolitics. There's always a very strong moral, ethic, spiritual component. For instance, they frame their uh, defense of Gaza in a very, very complex, multi-level way, and especially they are morally obliged to defend our brothers, the way they frame it. So it's very sophisticated, and well, it's no wonder. Now they are the Quran. Prophet Muhammad. I think there are more than 40 mentions of Yemenis in the Quran. They practice original Islam, the real pure 7th century Islam, not the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. And there's no wonder why the Wahhabis hate them. They have no bloody culture. Yemen is a very powerful ancient culture. These are the navigators who brought Islam to here, to Southeast Asia. The first navigators were Yemenis that arrived in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. So it's on a whole new level, and it's immensely impressive. And of course, in terms of what they can do to, serious headaches, not only for the Saudis, but for the American Israeli Epstein complex. What they can do in the Red Sea and the Bab al Mandeb, for them is natural. It comes naturally. They say, yes, if we need to block it again, we'll do it. This is what they were saying last year. I'm worried this year because I lost contact with some of my friends we were talking about via Telegram, and they haven't answered my latest messages. So I am worried. Maybe there is an internal internet problem in Yemen. Quite possible.
Right.
To give an idea, Dimitri, they lost all their planes. They were saying, look, we would like to invite you guys again to come here this year, but we have no planes. They were bombed by the bloody Israelis.
When you referred to the spokesman, I assume you're referring to Mohammed al Bukaiti.
Yes, I spent more than 1 hour talking to Al Bukaiti in Sana'a. He's extremely well prepared.
We had the opportunity to interview him about a year
You
ago.
did? Okay, great, great.
At the end of it, I don't know if he introduced you to his boys, but they were this wonderful children he brought into the screen at the very end of the interview. And what impressed me about him is, as you said, it was his calm, his equanimity, his grace. Not at all the picture that we in the West are given about Ansarallah and his officials. But I'm curious to know, Pepe, we've seen these incredible images of masses of people in Sana'a coming out regularly to support the defense of the Palestinian people and the opposition to the Zionist entity. Was it your impression when you were there that the public support for this defense of the Palestinian cause and the axis of resistance remains robust?
Dimitri, when you see that it's an enormous, I would say it's a mix of a square and a parking lot. So enormous, with the mountains in the back. When you see 1 million people in front of you, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Look, I have been as a foreign correspondent for 40 years, everywhere, literally. So you think that you've seen it all. No. When you see something like this, you're like, and of course, I had the supreme honor to have 1 minute to deliver a message to them. The guy said, "Do you want to go on stage?" I said, "Yes, definitely, but please, Don't worry, I'm going to be very brief. Give me 1 minute. So
What was your message? I would most curious to know. What did you say?
basically, my message was very simple. And of course, the next day I was known because I was in every Yemeni TV channel. We were a very small group of foreigners after all.
Yeah.
And basically, I said, look, the whole planet identifies with you and they support your struggle. Wow. So the crowd, wow. which is absolutely correct.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and later you have time to speak to many of them, and it's fascinating because they are from different tribes from all over Yemen, not only Houthis from the north. They are from other tribes as well, including tribes from the deserts in Hadramaut or towards the east, and even people who were in Aden, the capital. They said, look, Aden has been destroyed because of Arab interference, Emiratis and Saudis. And many people left Aden to go back to Sana'a. There are a lot of people who are former Aden residents who are now in Sana'a. And they started supporting the Houthis only recently. So this means that the Houthis, they have this factor of agglutination of Yemen, which eventually they will probably, I would say, mid to long term, they could even run the whole of the country, because Aden essentially is an UAE dominated Saudi UAE, but more UAE. And UAE, as we know now, is collapsing in real time in front of everyone.
Yeah.
The Dubai business model is already dead, and the next is Abu Dhabi. And they're running out of dollars. They're begging the US to have access to dollars. So this is the beginning of the end. And obviously, they made their choice, Dimitri. For instance, Qatar, their protector now is Turkey. Saudi Arabia, they have a defense pact with Pakistan. And the UAE chose Israel as their partner. So eventually, they're going to go down eventually.
And what about Bahrain, Pepe?
Well, Bahrain is fascinating because I love following Iraqi scholars. So the last time I was in Iraq was 2 years ago in Baghdad, and I met some very, very smart people. Some of them are part of this government. And they are already discussing the post-American Gulf. And they say, look, Bahrain, they have two options. They're going to be absorbed by Saudi Arabia, which is probably not going to happen because the majority is Shiite, or they're going to be absorbed by Iran. That's quite possible. And the UAE, they said UAE eventually will go back to Oman.
Inshallah. Whoa, that'll be a moment of great rejoicing in the anti-imperialist cause. So let me move over closer to your neck of the woods with my next question, Pepe, and that is the reaction of the Chinese government to yesterday's
That's
event.
complicated.
And I'm going to put up on the screen. It is indeed. I'm really curious to get
Yes,
your
go ahead.
thoughts. If I could just show you and our audience, there have been a number of statements, but here's one that came out a couple of hours ago. This is I picked this up from the Irish Times, but apparently it's based on a report from Reuters that
Yes.
President he called Saudi Arabia's crown prince, which is an interesting decision, and
Yes.
he expressed concern over renewed instability around the strategic waterway. China, the report says, is the main buyer of Iranian crude. Of course, we know that. And China advocates an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire and insists on resolving conflicts in the Middle East through political and diplomatic channels. This is coming from the state news agency Xinhua, citing President Xi. And finally, he's reported President Xi to have told the Saudi leader the Strait of Hormuz should remain open to normal passage, as this serves the common interests of regional countries and the international community. So this is extraordinarily neutral,
Yes.
ambiguous. It certainly doesn't sound like any kind of a warning to the United States. What do you make of the statements coming out of the Chinese government today?
But they are the masters of understatement, as we all know, and they are never blunt. especially, I'm talking basically about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but especially sea. Every sea world is calculated to oblivion. And he always needs to project this image of impartiality, of being neutral. Of course, in the case of China in the Persian Gulf, they have very good relations with Iran, but also with the Persian Gulf monarchies. After all, especially Saudi Arabia, they buy most of their oil in the Persian Gulf from Saudi Arabia. By the way, most of it paid in yuan. But it's never advertised that it's paid in yuan. Otherwise, the Americans will go completely nuts. It's very discreet. But mostly the balance nowadays is more yuan than petrodollars. And sooner or later, they're going to pick up the phone to Riyadh and say, from now on, it's only petrodollars. With Iran is already petro yuan for a long time, which is one of the reasons of this blockade, which is a stupid blockade because China has so many sources apart from uh, everything that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. They have Russia, two pipelines, oil and gas. They have Kazakhstan, oil pipeline. They have Turkmenistan, gas pipeline. They have Myanmar, gas pipeline. Not to mention inside, they are 80, 84 to 86% self-sufficient already. It's something that you see in when you go to Xinjiang. When I was in Xinjiang last year, my first shock, because I had not been to Western China for 10 years or so. When you come back after 10 years, it's like, wow, it's totally electrified. And you see forests of uh, wind turbines, solar panels, solar farms with those poles where reflecting the sun, hundreds of kilometers around. Xinjiang has so much energy that they sell energy to the rest of China. So it's not that China is dependent on the Strait of Hormuz. This is, let's say, 13% of what they import in oil and gas. It's not too much. And the Russians already said, in fact, Lavrov said that, I think, 2 days ago, max. He said, look, you need more gas, no problem. The power of Siberia 2 is not ready. It's going to be ready next year. But the power of Siberia 1 is almost full capacity, but they can start using the spare capacity as well. And China will get more gas from, in fact, the number one provider of gas to China now is already Russia. So they are not worried. Not to mention they have reserves for months on end. So it's not complicated at all. But the Chinese in public, and this is, for instance, I spend a lot of time going through some Chinese channels that are not directly linked to the pyramid of information. Xinhua, China Daily, all that. My friends at Guansha in Shanghai, they are semi-independent. But you try to see some of their best academics. They never enter directly into these analysis. Of course, there's a limit to what you may say. Still, even in completely non-official press. So it's complicated, but I'm going there in 3 weeks. That will be my best shot to have from themselves. How do they actually analyze the war in broader terms? Uh, Far away, it's impossible to know, Dimitri. It's very complicated because there is this element of never interrupt your enemy when he's committing serial mistakes, which is the case. So they prefer to be quiet. They're just watching. But now, for instance, I would say this is a crucial example. You have an attack on uh, an Iranian vessel that left from a Chinese port. Gaolan port is in Zhuhai, in southern China, uh, going to Iran. So this is an attack on China as well. So how they're going to react to that specifically, as much as they don't want a direct confrontation. And we should never forget, 3 weeks before Trump goes to Beijing, the the meeting is still scheduled for May 14th. Nobody knows if this meeting is going to happen.
My sort of bigger, maybe it's sort of primitive assessment of the situation for China is that if the Iranian government were to fall and were to be replaced, either Iran were to descend into chaos or the government were to be replaced by some regime that is entirely subservient to Washington. Effectively, the United States would have a stranglehold over this incredibly important region, one which American military planners after World War II described as a stupendous source of strategic power, the greatest imperial prize in human history, for obvious reasons. It's not just the resources, it's also the geostrategic location, the trade routes, and so forth. And the United States were to obtain unchallenged control over this region, would undoubtedly use that power to weaken China to the maximum possible degree. And I imagine that the Chinese must be keenly aware of this. And so I would assume, I could be wrong, that they think they have powerful reasons to assist Iran and to ensure that it doesn't fall. Do you think that that's likely to be their calculus?
Of course, it is, Dimitri, and this is very clear for Moscow and Beijing, for the leadership. Iran must not fall, whatever it takes. And if they thought that Iran would be on the brink of regime change, then they would intervene in a more direct way. For the moment, they don't need to. First of all, because the Iranians don't ask. And this is something that you learn when you talk to, for instance, Iranian delegations that go to Moscow all the time. So I was always talking to them when they were in Moscow. And they were saying, it's okay, no problem. They are, okay, anything you want, or anything we want, we can talk to you, etc. But they also said that they never asked anything from the Russians, specifically. And when that comes, the Russians said, if that's the case, we're ready to help immediately if you really need it. So there is this element of trust. With China, it's more complicated because with China, they have a very specific deal. They signed in 2021 the $400 billion 25-year energy infrastructure deal. This is very, very complex. And obviously, the Chinese know that they need Iran because Iran is their focus for the new Silk Roads. The most important partner in Central Eurasia for China is Iran. Is the crossroads of all those. There are six, in fact, there are seven corridors going from Xinjiang across Central Asia towards Europe eventually. Some of them are blocked. For instance, the Trans-Siberian for the moment is blocked because of sanctions. But the Chinese built a railway inside Iran to connect to the railways across Central Asia. So from Xinjiang, it goes to Kazakhstan, then Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and then it crosses the border to Iran. The Chinese built for this railway, and guess what happened only a few weeks ago? The Americans bombed a stretch of this railway, which means they bombed a new Silk Road project paid by the Chinese. So they knew exactly what they were bombing, right? So in terms of connectivity corridors for China, Iran is the number one across. Well, since the ancient Silk Roads was always like that. So obviously they cannot even imagine the possibility of a pro-American government getting. But they know that this is not going to happen. The Chinese read the internal situation in Tehran very well, and they are closely connected. For instance, Arakshi talks to Wang Yi as much as Lavrov talks to Wang Yi, and it is at the highest level. So they know what's going on, and they're not worried that might be regime change, especially when they saw the response which started half an hour after the decapitation strike, they could see that Iran was ready for it. And they, of course, they interfere with the way Iran is managing the whole thing. They are very worried, of course, about Hormuz, because from their point of view, it's much obvious, it's much better to have the Strait of Hormuz completely open than now. Even if until 2 days ago, for Chinese ships, it was absolutely open. And many of them were not even paying the toll booth. But then, of course, after the American blockade, then they blockaded the strait completely. Obviously, the Chinese don't want that. When they say we want the Strait of Hormuz open, it also means open like it was until a few days ago. Because there was already a government-to-government agreement, Iran, China, that the Chinese tankers will be able to do the back and forth with no problem. The problem now is the American interference with this illegal blockade.
And Pepe, do you think that China has enough leverage over to Iran if push came to shove to oblige the Iranians to open the Strait of Hormuz? Or do you think the Iranians are perfectly capable of saying, look, this is our ace in the hole, and while we understand your interest in seeing the strait open, this is an existential war for us, and we deem it necessary to keep it closed. What do you think the dynamic is?
Absolutely. And don't forget, the Persians are very proud. It's 2,500 years, behind them. They are very proud culture, sure of themselves. They hate any form of foreign interference, and the Chinese are clever enough to not even try foreign interference. They don't admit that in China. Why would the Persians admit it in Iran? Same thing. Of course, at a level that we don't see, at the highest level, message have been sent to Tehran saying, look, we got your back, but of course, we prefer that we can have our energy traffic undisturbed. We understand that for the moment it's a little bit complicated, but the Chinese, of course, are always they're always looking ahead, and because the relationship at the highest level is so strong, they know that even if there's going to be a new juridical status for the Strait of Hormuz. Everybody knows that. It has already been approved by Iranian parliament. They start to discuss with Oman already. So on both territorial waters, there's going to be a toll booth, inevitably. That's fine with China. Absolutely fine with them. Because they know that the thing will be tankers from the so-called hostile nations. Or, for instance, tankers from the UAE. UAE refuses to pay the toll booths, but they're going to have to. Otherwise, that's it. Otherwise, they're dead. They simply won't be able to export anymore, period.
We all got to pay the piper sometime. That's what I would.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's, to conclude our discussion, I'd like to shift things, but kind of taking you all over the world. Pepe, I'd like to come back to the Eastern Mediterranean, where I'm currently situated. And if you just bear with me, I want to take a few minutes to kind of set the table for my question.
No problem. Go ahead. Yes.
My question is going to relate to tensions between Israel and Turkey, and in particular how Greece and Cyprus play into this, because they've clearly aligned themselves with Israel, both economically and militarily. And I'm just going to show one example of this. This is a report from Al Jazeera in February of this year. And in that report, the Greek government, officials from the Greek government told Al Jazeera that Greece is interested in jointly developing weapons with Israel. The chairman of the Greek Parliament's Defense Affairs Committee told Al Jazeera, his name is Angelos Sidigos, we are an excellent customer of Israeli systems. The leap in our defense relationship will happen when there's co-production of defense systems and common planning. There's also strong evidence that Greece is helping Israel and the United States to wage war on Iran. I was recently at the Suda military base the U.S./NATO/Greek military base in the north of Crete, and from the Chania airport, which is a joint military-civilian project. As we noted, as I reported on Reason to Resist about a week ago, there was a lot of military transport traffic going through that airport. And recently, within the last days, someone compiled a graph from flight radar, and you'll see here huge number of U.S. military transport planes, according to Flight Radar 24, going from Northern Europe, Britain, down to West Asia. They're going through Greek airspace, and if you pay careful attention, you'll see that a lot of them are stopping in Crete, where presumably they're refueling or they're loading. That's down in the Eastern Mediterranean, obviously. So this is just one piece of evidence about the role that Greece is playing. Greece has also, this is a matter of public record, allowed the Israeli Air Force to use Greek airspace to practice bombing runs on Iran. That was a couple of years ago. And then on top of that, we have statements like this coming from Naftali Bennett.
Is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran. Erdogan is sophisticated, dangerous, and he seeks to encircle Israel. And while some senior Israelis were on Qatar's payroll, Qatar and Turkey are nourishing the Islamic Brotherhood monster that is growing and eventually might become as dangerous as the one created by Iran. Turkey and Qatar are gaining influence not only in Syria, but also in Gaza, through the front door, and everywhere, and trying to create a new choke ring. Turkey is trying to flip Saudi Arabia against us and establish a hostile Sunni axis with nuclear Pakistan.
So all of this has provoked a strong response from Turkish foreign minister. Last week, Hakan Fidan criticized Greece and Cyprus over their cooperation with Israel, warning it could heighten regional tensions. And he said cooperation between Greece, the Greek Cypriot administration, and Israel does not bring more trust, it brings more mistrust, it brings more problems and war. And he added that Athens is pursuing an extremely dangerous policy. Quote, there are very interesting aspects in Greece's attempt to pursue a kind of policy that no other country in Europe follows alone. So this is a bit of a delicate subject for me to address, Pepe, because I am in Greece. And while there's a popular opposition to Israel and massive discontent with its crimes against the Palestinian people, the fact is that there is a significant percentage of the Greek population that believes that Turkey is a major threat and that our best protection, when I say our, I mean the Greek people, is to align ourselves with Israel. And there's a significant percentage of the Cypriot population ascribes to that view as well, even though I think most Cypriots are very appalled by what Israel has done to the Palestinian people. And so from your perspective as someone sitting on the outside, I guess I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, how much of this rhetoric that you hear going back and forth between Turkey and Israel is theater? And how much of it do you think is serious? Do you think they actually do regard each other as a major threat to their own security, or are they more or less cooperating behind the scenes and just putting on a show for their own electorates?
Okay. After I say something, I'd like to ask you directly, how do you see Greece profiting from this alliance with Israel? Is it parallel to the Modi-Israeli alliance? Like Modi expects to get military technology, surveillance technology, etc. This was Greece is aiming at. But okay, from the position, from the point of view of a nomad outsider, we all know that there's only one Zionist project, which is to pit everybody against everybody else. Arabs, Sunnis or Shiites, Persians, Turks, Kurds fighting each other to kingdom come, literally, to the profit of Eretz Israel expanding their borders. There's no other plan B for them. So obviously they need to create or recreate or invent enemies nonstop. So they're already thinking about the next enemy. And apparently it's already designated. It's Turkey. Okay, considering that how monolithic and monochromatic their strategic thinking is, that's not anything that we should be. The problem is, are they throwing Greece into this mix without even asking the people who actually run Greece? It's if this is for Greek interests. I think this is the key question, and that's my question to you. In fact, I don't see Greece profiting from this association. I don't see anything for Greece out of it, and especially because Turkey and Greece, it's something that can be negotiated. There are rational actors on both sides, which is not the case when it comes to Israel and the axis of resistance in West Asia. One is a completely irrational actor, and the other ones are rational. In the case of Greece and Turkey, they're both rational actors. In terms of Turkish public opinion, I am sorry that I have not been to Greece lately. I am a pre-Socratic, just to give you an idea. But I grew up with Greek philosophy in my head. So obviously I was instantly attracted to Greek culture since I was a teenager already. But the vagaries of geopolitics take me to Istanbul. I even lived there for a few months during the beginning of the SMO. I don't see Turkish public opinion seeing Greece as antagonistically. You don't feel that when you are in Turkey. And even talking to some Turkish officials, okay, outside of the AKP, please. Uh, for instance, when you talk to Kemalists in Istanbul, absolutely nothing against Turkey. On the contrary, because they value Greece on a cultural level, on a high cultural level. So this is a thing that maybe includes certain specific gains for the Greek ruling classes. And this would be my question to you. Mm-hmm. Is this the trick in the end?
Mm-hmm. So this is an excellent question, Pepe. Let me start by saying, and I know this is always treacherous waters for a Greek to wade into.
Of course. Please, be careful. Be careful.
That's not my inclination, but I nonetheless do this with some trepidation because it is a sensitive subject. Obviously with the Ottoman Empire having occupied Greece for so long, that's left a bitter taste in the mouths of many Greeks, and understandably so. But I don't believe, and I've had plenty of interactions with Turks in the past few years, and in fact, one of the people who went on my trip to Iran was a Turkish journalist. Mm-hmm. Who was a wonderful young man, and we got along fabulously. And so all my interactions with ordinary Turks have been positive. I never felt that they were hostile towards me. I often thought that they were kind of worried that I might be hostile towards them because I was a Greek. But they never showed any discourtesy to me because when they learned that I was Greek. I think that what happens is the Greek government hypes the threat from Turkey in order to justify absurd levels of military spending. And a lot of that has to do with corruption. They love that there's a lot of corruption in the military-industrial complex in Greece. The oligarchy profits enormously from this. The oligarchy profits enormously from doing business with Israel, not just in the military sector, but also a recent report came out which showed that Greek shippers have been providing covertly a lot of oil, gas, and coal and military equipment to Israel during the genocide. And the Greek oligarchy has tremendous influence over the government. And the government also is highly subservient to Washington, the Greek government. And Washington demands, in fact, that the Greek government facilitate Israel's crimes. So that is also a factor. And I really feel as a Greek that we are being taken to the cleaners here. I think that what Israel is trying to do is trying to use us as proxies in potentially some kind of military conflict in the future with Turkey. And you can be damn sure that if that happens, that conflict is going to be fought principally on Cypriot and Greek soil, not on Israel's soil.
Not Israel's soil.
So I'm curious about your thoughts of all of that. That's what I feel is happening here. And my final sort of exhortation to my fellow Greeks is stop drinking the Kool-Aid. There's absolutely no reason why we can't get along with our Turkish brothers and sisters. And the last thing we should be doing, I mean, if you can't bring yourself to side with Turkey in some kind of a conflict with Israel, fine. But the last thing we should be doing is siding with Israel in any conflict.
Absolutely.
And, so if you have anything to add to that, Pepe.
No. You answered the question, Dimitri, because I think hitting the nail on the head is how Israel always plays divide and rule. And once again, they are playing divide and rule using both Turkey and Greece. And public opinion in Greece and in Turkey, they have to be very, very careful about that, because they will start playing Israel's game sooner or later. They cannot do this thing in Iran or in Lebanon. In fact, in Lebanon they do, because in Lebanon they provoke civil war inside Lebanon. This is what they're doing. They're basically supporting a government of traitors in Beirut against Hezbollah. So it's the only thing that they know how to do, apart from killing women and children. That's it.
Precisely, brother. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Enormous pleasure.
I hope we can have you on again soon, and tap your brain for any number of other pearls of wisdom.
Yes, after China, is that when I'm in China or leave China, I'm gonna have some juicy things to tell you.
Take care. Peace out.
Okay, take care. Cheers. Peace.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.